Hey, everybody, I'm Scott Weichel. You're listening to My Kind of Country on MKOCRadio.com. My guest tonight has a brand new album out, and he was named the Carolina Music Male Vocalist Award of the Year. And his new album, ironically, is called Carolina Sunset. And it's a pleasure to have him on the show to talk about his music tonight and his career. This is David Lee Jones. David, how are you tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. Hope you are.
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for taking time to be on the show. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely.
Well, before we get into your new album, I'd like to go back and talk about your career and tell me a little bit about your upbringing and how you got into this wonderful world of music.
Okay, well, I guess we can go all the way back to 1975, I guess. I was 3 years old, and my parents bought a little keyboard, and I started playing keyboard at 3, and it just kind of took off from there. I was a drummer at 10 years old. I had played like hard rock and heavy metal, and when I was 10, from about 10 to maybe 14, I was actually at an Ozzy Osbourne concert and saw the guitar player, and it made me want to play guitar. So I started playing guitar around 14 or 15, and actually moved from that was where my transition from rock and roll to country started. The country was a whole lot easier to play back then.
Yeah.
And I had a little band with a couple guys in high school called Bad Influence, and I played my first show professionally at 15 for a festival in a little town I grew up in called Bethel, North Carolina. And we played the Bethel Harvest Festival that year and opened up for a three-piece country band. And they were the Powell Brothers Band, and the guitar player approached me after the show and asked me if I'd ever thought about playing just straight country, and I said, well, no, not really. I said, but I'll try it. So I went and practiced with them a couple times, and I've been playing country ever since, and that was in 1990, I believe it was.
Wow, that's great. Well, I know you've worked and opened for some pretty big names. I know Waylon Jennings, George Jones, Merle Haggard.
Oh, yeah. We, not as a solo artist, but I was in a band called 8 Second Ride back in the 90s, and just about every major act that came through North Carolina, we were the opening band for.
Oh,
And
nice.
I've met a bunch of legends in my time, that's for sure.
Is there anybody that stands out from that time that you got to meet and just was kind of like an aha moment for you?
It would have to be Waylon, because we played with him, and that even wasn't with 8 Second Ride. That was before 8 Second Ride. Waylon Jennings played the State Fair, and in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I was fortunate enough to be like backstage when he got off of the bus, and when he stepped off of the bus, I'm like, wow, there he is right there, and that's probably the moment that stands out in my whole life. And I actually own a Waylon Jennings Telecaster today.
Oh, nice.
And I play it on stage, and I do all my Waylon Jennings stuff, and I play Merle Haggard on it. All the older country, I play on that Telecaster because it just has that sound.
Yeah.
And
Nothing better than a Telecaster. I'll tell you what, for country music, it's the best instrument as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly. I play a custom Telecaster most of my show, and I've got probably 10 or 12 guitars, but I just take those two tellies on stage, and that's the only two I play on stage.
That's pretty great. I love it. So I was reading your bio, and your dad was a musician and was a big Hank Williams fan, and also Elvis Presley. And I read that you learned the entire Madison Square Garden live album from Elvis Presley, word for word. Is that right?
I did.
I love it.
We had an organ in the back room of my house when I was growing up. It had one of those big wooden organ stools, and I would stand on that stool and put that album on, and just day in and day out, I would learn Elvis live at Madison Square Garden. And it took me maybe a year, and I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, and I finally learned it, and I would stand on that stool, and I would be Elvis in concert every day.
I love it, man. That's great. That's dedication right there.
Oh yeah, he's kind of the artist that I've tried to model this whole solo thing after, because Elvis was an entertainer for sure, and that's my goal, to be an entertainer like Elvis. So I don't
Absolutely.
have a few years. I don't have but a few good years left, so I need to do it now.
There you go. Well, that's a good model to take after. Elvis was certainly a wonderful entertainer, and one of the greatest singers in all of music. He had,
Oh yeah.
man, I'll tell you, to this day, the my very favorite version of "Peace in the Valley" is by Elvis Presley. I just don't think anybody ever did that song better than he did.
Absolutely. I've got that on vinyl right here at the house. I sure do.
Yep, absolutely. Well, DavidLeeJones.org is the website, and you have a brand new album out called Carolina Sunset. And I believe you've written most of the songs on this album. And tell me a little bit about this project.
Well, my wife and I write together a lot. Her name's Amy, and she wrote poetry before she and I got together. I lost my first wife to brain cancer,
Oh, I'm sorry.
and the last track on this album is kind of that story of how we found out she had cancer and all that. And my wife helped me, my current wife now helped me write that. I wrote the chorus, and I just got stuck on it, and I gave it to her, and I said, how about write something around this? And she basically wrote the whole song. I wrote the chorus, and she wrote the rest of it. But it's kind of the story of what happened with my first wife, and how we found out, and everything that led up to the very end of it. And it's a personal song for me, and it's one I haven't been able to do live yet. But it's the last track on the album, and the first track is the title track, and she and I wrote that together, and we were actually riding down the road, and it just came to me, and I started humming, and I was singing, and she was writing as I was singing. And there's several, well, there's a few tracks up there that I wrote, but Brandy on My Mind, a buddy of mine named Gary Brady, wrote that, and he was in a band with me, the Powell Brothers band, as a matter of fact, I mentioned earlier. He was the lead singer of that band back in the 90s, and he wrote that song, and a friend of his, Eric Strickland, cut it first, and he pitched it to me, and my version is like a light switch on and off from what Eric cut, and so he's real proud of that, and I'm proud of it too, because he's got two songs out, and they sound completely different.
Oh, wow.
And
That's cool.
And Dance in the Moonlight, I wrote with a friend of mine that we went to school with, and I was riding around, and a Frankie Ballard tune came on the radio, and it kind of clicked in my head of how I wanted Dance in the Moonlight to sound. So I don't want to give Frankie Ballard credit for it, but it was his song. I can't even think of the name of the song now, but it was his song that kind of sparked the idea for Dance in the Moonlight, because I had the lyrics, and I sat on it for like 2 years, and I couldn't think of a melody to go with it at all. And I heard that Frankie Ballard tune, and I was like, well, maybe we should try that. So it's kind of a more upbeat, I would say maybe modern country sound to that one.
That's pretty cool.
And there's a couple covers on the album. Travis Tritt's Anymore, I covered that, and we actually did a live track of Waylon's Rose in Paradise that my wife Amy actually recorded with her cell phone.
Oh, no kidding.
We took it in the studio and kind of beefed it up a little bit, made it sound a little bit better, and what you hear in that track is what my band sounds like live through the PA. I mean, it was recorded with a cell phone, literally.
Wow, that's
So,
cool. That's cool. I like that. That's
yeah.
that's a great
I'm really
way.
proud of that.
That's a great way for people to really know what an artist sounds like, and it's, when you get to hear somebody live, it's you know exactly what they're all about, and if they can sound like that on their recordings, you know they're the real deal, and you certainly do. You're a fantastic singer, and the songs you're writing are about real life. People put to music, and it sounds like some good musical therapy came out of this album for you.
Oh yeah, yeah. It helps a lot to just sit down and get quiet and write. Of course, I've got two small kids, so very seldom it's quiet.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that. So what are your plans to get out and promote this album?
Well, we're playing as much as we can. In fact, I just got home from Pennsylvania Sunday night, and we're home for a week, and then we're leaving this coming Sunday for Wyoming, and we'll be in Casper, Wyoming for 5 nights. Then we go up to Minot, North Dakota for 6 nights, back down to Mandan, North Dakota for 6 nights, and then we'll end that run in Cheyenne, Wyoming at the Outlaw Saloon, 6 nights there, and then we'll come back home and stay home for a few weeks and do it all over again, I guess.
Wow, you're staying busy. That's great. I'm glad to hear it.
I'm playing as much as possible to get my music out there.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, you're also on Facebook and Twitter, and you've got a YouTube channel, and we'll put that information on our Facebook page. And davidleejones.org is the website to go to get the new album that is called Carolina Sunset. And one more song I want to ask you about on this album. This is probably, it's hard for me to pick a favorite, but this is kind of the one that I keep going to. It's called As Monday Morning Comes Around.
That song was actually written by Timothy Ray Wilson, and he sung, oddly enough, he sung in a band I was in before, and he's a fantastic songwriter, and I heard he played me his version with his vocals on it, and he just looked at me, he said, I think you can cut this. He said, and I think it's going to be really good. And me, honestly, I'm not used to singing that low, but when I heard it and we got in the studio, and it took me maybe 4 or 5 times to get the vocals like I wanted it, because it was just so low. I'm not used to singing that low. Mm-hmm. And after we did it that last time, and I'm still not happy with it. I mean, because I'm my own worst critic, but everybody that's bought my CDs on the road at my shows, they've always came back to that song, and they like the music, and they like the voice, and all that. And I hadn't done anything to try to promote that yet, but since you brought it up, we might have to start promoting that song.
Yeah, that's a good song, and sometimes the litmus test for a song is when you play it out on the road and you get great crowd response, and sometimes the ones you just don't think are going to take off are the ones that do. So.
Oh yeah.
Well, certainly I want to play that one, and we're going to play some other cuts off the album, and it's davidleejones.org is the website to go to, and go check out some of David's shows. He's out there playing a lot. I hope you get a chance to go and see him and pick up the new album, Carolina Sunset. And David, I appreciate you taking time to be on the show, and look forward to hearing more from you.
Yes, sir, and I appreciate you taking time to interview me.
Oh, it's my honor. David Lee Jones on My Kind of Country as we continue right here on MKOCRadio.com.